Might be here.
You have a copy of the minutes, if there's any additions or corrections. If not, I'll entertain a motion to be approved. Mr. Hughes, Mr. Lyon, all in favor? Okay, it is unanimous. You have a copy of the transfers. A couple of these things that we've got in here were, in making the new budget, were some small line items that were just overlooked in making the budget to start with. And the bottom one down there, got Parks and Rec program support. That was money we put in reserve for transfer because we matched the city's what they put in. So we took the money out and put it in there. And that's kind of an explanation on that. Any questions on any of it? If not, I'll entertain a motion that we approve.
For approval.
All in favor?
Judge, I'm going to recuse myself from the Parks and Rec on there, please.
Okay. Then the bills and hand checks, there's, these are big checks, but they're just money transferring from one fund to the other that's not on there. The road fund, we have to write a check from the general fund into the road fund for $400,000. That's considered a bill. And the same thing for the jail, $400,000. That's to get the year started for payroll and so forth. It's just part of the budgeted money. And any questions? If not, entertain a motion to pay those bills.
Make motion to approve.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Judge, I'm going to recuse from any Parks and Rec that may be on there, please.
Okay. And the sheriff fees need to be noted in the minutes, $32,522.20. And you need to, is everybody received their quarterly report? Anybody did not? The minutes show that everyone received the quarterly reports. And we have Mr. Pickering here to tell us about the site evaluation. Bill, I guess you're the front and center or whoever.
Thank you. Again, I'm Bill Pickering with CMW and Brad Boaz with CMW. We're here to, we've submitted to you all the binder on the facility replacement concept, programming and concept design for the buildings, for the road department replacement facility, and also we've submitted to you the binder on the site evaluations of the sites for the replacement facility. And I think since the primary focus is certainly the site evaluation and your contemplation of the sites, I'll let Brad start with review of the sites, and then you can entertain any of your questions. Thank you.
Good morning. Again, my name is Brad Boaz with CMW, landscape architect, and hopefully everybody got a copy of the site evaluation and you've had a chance to go through it. I'd be happy to go through each item individually and explain, what we found and kind of our thoughts on it, or if you just have individual questions, things you didn't understand clearly, or things that you may question, please feel free to ask those. I just want to be able to provide as much information to you guys as you can so that you can make an informed decision on which site is most appropriate to house the road department replacement facility. So it's really up to you guys. Whatever you want me to do, I'm happy to provide that information.
I don't have any.
Go ahead.
I was going to say I don't have any questions yet because I haven't had an opportunity to look at it.
Yeah, we just got it yesterday, so.
Okay.
It's a lot to digest.
It is a lot to digest, and getting it yesterday is probably not enough time to really read through it and analyze the information. As a brief overview, I'll be happy to do that. We initiated the study at Cincinnati Pike behind the existing Scott County Fire Department building. There's a large parcel of land, approximately 70 acres, west of the Dry Run Stream, that is potentially suitable for the project. There's obviously plenty of land. There's a couple of open spaces. There's a lot of vegetation on the site. There were some limitations with that site, notably crossing the stream right now. To access that western part of the site, there's just a pipe culvert going through there. The area where the stream is pretty gentle as it rises back up out of the floodplain. So to modify that, there's a significant floodway in there, and that would take a pretty significant amount of work, of paperwork going through the Corps of Engineers, through Kentucky Division of Water, installing a bridge culvert, a concrete culvert to cross that stream to access the other side. 'Cause it's going to have to be substantial, obviously, with the vehicles that would be traveling from Cincinnati Pike back to the road department facility. There were issues, a couple of issues we saw with the soil, and researching the soil that's there. There's some underlying shale that has the potential to heave and shrink throughout the year as the climatic conditions change. Some good things about the site were its proximity to I-75. It's less than a mile from that exit on 75, so as you're trying to get materials in and out of that facility, it's quick access. It's centrally located right in the county. I mean, if you dropped a pin right in the center of the county, this site would most likely hit that pin. Some utility extensions. There is electric and water down to the co-op buildings that are down there near Dry Stream. So it'd be approximately 1,200 linear foot extension of those utilities up to the new facility. There's no gas within 1.25 miles or so of the site. Went and studied the maps at Columbia Gas, and they said there's just nothing in that vicinity. It would take a pretty significant extension to run a natural gas line to the site. And there's also, outside the city limits, there's not sanitary sewer within a significant area as well. So it most likely have to be done on septic system, which I think would be suitable. Also in the study is for each site is a different site design for how this all could be laid out. Again, at this conceptual stage, it's just an initial shot of best organizing the different buildings and how they're going to function together, how to get the large vehicles in and out of the garage, in and out of the site, how to load salt vehicles as they're coming in and out of the site. Just having the winter we just had, we know, and hearing from JR and their experience, it's got to be an efficient way of getting vehicles off the roads into the site, loaded up, and back out on the streets to make sure that they're being able to clear the roads as quickly as possible. And so all in all, again, I think Cincinnati Pike could be a suitable site. There just are some limitations that we uncovered as we researched that site. The second site is a portion of Great Crossing behind Western Elementary School. If you'd looked at the site 2 years ago, I'd say it probably would be not feasible to do it here. But with the new bypass extension and the proposed connector road through Great Crossing, it quickly became a very suitable site. It's on a high elevation way above North Elkhorn Creek, so that floodplain doesn't become an issue. The soils appear to be pretty good for building. The only potential limitation would be the depth of bedrock, which is 5 to 6 feet below the surface, which I don't anticipate us having to excavate that much to put the pads on. It's gentle slopes at this specific site, 2 to 3%, which means we wouldn't have to do mass grading to create a level pad. Utility extensions. With the road extension, they ran an overhead 3-phase line almost right to our site, so it'd just be a small connection. KU would likely not charge to run overhead across the bypass and set a new pole near our site. There's natural gas in the Canewood neighborhood adjacent to the site. And speaking with Columbia Gas, it appears that line has enough pressure to service not only the road department but the entire Great Crossing development, however it expands in the future. So that was a bit of good news. Looking at, let's see here, we got water. There's also water in the Canewood neighborhood, and that we could tie in off of them. And then again, thinking down the road, if this piece of property becomes developed out, it'd be nice to go on now and run a loop connection to tie in over to Stamping Ground Road, so that, again, as the park develops, it would just be tying in off this new line that would potentially run right along the proposed connector road. And thinking of some limitations, sanitary could be an issue. There are lift stations within the area, but again, connecting from the county property, the city property. I know there's some issues and some limitations there. Again, this could also be run on a septic system. And then again, with Great Crossing, we have tried to come up with two completely different options for how this thing could be laid out. So it's a second option, splitting up the equipment shed. Instead of having vehicular connections all the way around it, we split it into two buildings, and so it really frames the property so that it provides a little bit of screening from the bypass, limiting how much security fence we would have, but also, again, providing efficient access throughout the facility, as well as how to get, again, salt trucks in and out, how to get delivery trucks in and out, so that, again, the road department can do what they do best, which is serve the county. At the back, there are a comparative matrix so that we'll work with JR and his staff to how to score the different features and how important was road access, how important was the proximity within the county, utility extensions, so on and so forth, so that the maximum score they could get would be 100, and then working with JR, putting evaluation on those. So if there was electric on the site, they'd get a perfect score, and if there was electric 10 miles away, it'd get a pretty poor score. So we did that and try to come up with a way of quantifying these two sites so that you could see, again, based on objective measures, how they would score compared to each other. And then the last 2 pages are a cost estimate. Again, it's very rough, and it still has a lot to develop as far as how the site design will be played out, and that obviously affects cost. And so, again, just to give you a rough estimate on comparing the two costs of the two sites, that's provided at the end. Again, as I mentioned, Cincinnati Pike, just with that road extension to get back to their site and the bridge or the concrete culvert, that's just a significant line item, and that's why that one is more inflated than the Great Crossing. So that's, again, a brief overview. It probably spoke too fast, but hopefully able to get the gist of the study.
So that inflation rate on that part of it could be really reduced quite a bit if you had more basic information up front.
Well, no, sir. That's if, again, there's the bypass is proposed to go all the way through that site, and so if that happened tomorrow, then that site now becomes very suitable. It's just getting from the fire department building, down across the creek and back up to provide that infrastructure so that those large vehicles, so the fire department vehicles, buses can get back there is a significant expense.
One of the things, the way I want to look at this is, it might sound ridiculous to some people, but I'm looking about 25 years in the future.
Yes, sir.
And that's hard to do it. I don't have a crystal ball. And I'm guesstimating the population of Scott County could very easily be 125,000 by then. With the growth rate, if it's anything comparable to now, that's not out of question. If that were the case, best location, best possibility for expansion, because as we get bigger, there'll be more duties to perform. And so I'd like to have that aspect figured into it, because this garage here has been a long time on this park site.
Yes, sir.
And it's time for it to go, and it's time for us to move, but we definitely got to look into the future, because I don't want any other court to really have to be faced with decisions that maybe are things we should be looking at.
Yes, sir. And I think when you're thinking about 25 years down the road, it's where are obviously the new road's going to be. If there are 10 new neighborhoods that come up in the county, in the north part of the county, is it smart to put the thing, on the west of Georgetown so that it's further away? But if the growth continues to go, if growth expands around the city, and there's more road and infrastructure around the southern part of the county, then maybe the Great Crossing site becomes more suitable for the long-term access to the county. And then again, both sites have plenty of land available. I think one of the limitations to Great Crossing was there is so much potential for that site. How much of it do you utilize for the road department? How do you weigh that? Is the road department, the 7 acres that we've allocated now, is that enough, or do you say 10 acres so that there could be future development? Because that is a very prime piece of land that you want to use to its best capability.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
You just brought up a point that I just noticed, that the future alternative land uses, like I said, Great Crossing is unlimited. Here is the north side, very limited, yet you got the same score on both of them.
Well, it's how you look at it. It's, the county could use the Cincinnati Road site for any number of uses. I don't think it's a potentially significant public use for parks, just because of.
The words here, few options for future land use, and here, unlimited options. I mean, that's a pretty big difference, yet the score's the same. I don't understand how you got the same score with those two, and that's the way I see the two properties myself. It's
Right.
unlimited at the Great Crossing property, but very limited on the 25 property.
Well, yeah, again, I guess if there's, well, you're right, and probably Cincinnati Road should have been bumped up for that, because if there's few future alternative uses, then the road department would probably be the primary use of that piece of land. So you're probably right, that was miscalculated, and that should probably be bumped up to a 3 as opposed to the 1.
I wanted to clarify something on the fact that we just got these yesterday, because most people won't know, and it may seem trivial to all of us, but we weren't actually supposed to get these until today.
But
before
we were supposed to
Friday's
have the meeting Friday, yeah.
Yeah, but we moved our meeting back 2 days, so they actually got them to us yesterday beforehand. So I don't want anybody to think that they were dragging their feet or anything like that. We changed our meeting, which changed the whole schedule for everything to be presented.
Any other questions? There's not gonna be a vote today, but certainly I did, but,
Yeah,
I'm ready.
And feel free to call me at the office. and
well,
review
I'm ready
it.
too, but I'm not gonna push it. One question that comes to mind, the Cincinnati Road with the Corps of Engineers, that, we couldn't move forward till we got that.
Yes, sir, that's correct. We could move forward with, again, obviously all the conceptual design and design documents, but as far as construction goes, that is typically a pretty time intensive process to get them involved when we're modifying the floodway, the way that we anticipate we'd have to do.
We've dealt with them a little bit in the past.
Yes, sir.
Right now, how many acres are we discussing holding for the garage in the west? How many acres are set aside?
Well, both of them are around 7 acres as far as the perimeter of the fence for each one. I think Great Crossing was a little bit larger, and then Cincinnati Road was around 6.5. It's on there.
Okay, let's go 25 years in the future, and you gotta have expansion. Will we be having to go into possibly needing more parkland to supplement the garage?
But potentially, and I know that's something that Bill and JR have discussed, in their building program to make sure that the building will live that long. Is there anything, Bill, to comment on how far you projected this would utilize? Okay. And so I think, things like the equipment shed, if they, again, we have more guys on the staff, then they're gonna have more equipment. So I think that's something that would be expanded. And then potentially the amount of garage bays is another feature that would probably likely be needed to be expanded in order to satisfy those growing needs.
Brad, I guess, go ahead, Chuck.
Joe, how many acres are you operating under right now?
Probably 2.5.
I guess my question goes to, in virtually every year or so, Judge, we put in a box culvert somewhere in the county, we get some state cost share money on it. And it's usually substantially less than what you have budgeted in here. Of course, we know that we would have to go to the Corps of Engineers. It seems in the past when we've worked with those folks who did the box culverts on existing roads, they had very good access and abilities to work with the Corps and to mitigate those situations. Obviously, this is a new road, or could be considered a new road. We have one there, which obviously would be considered deficient if the Corps is made aware of it. But there is nothing from either site that rules either side out, in your opinion. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There was no devastating factor that said this site cannot be built upon.
And as you said, if these next phase of the bypass were in, it would change the scoring significantly.
Yes, sir. And it's just like I said, the Great Crossing, I'd say 2 or 3 years ago, was not a viable option.
And to that point, it becomes a viable option because we intend to build the connector road
Yes,
through
sir.
there.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and that changed within the last week or so. That knowing that was out to bid significantly in my opinion, made that much more viable.
Well, actually, that didn't change in the last week
Well,
or so. It's
the
been going
information
on
got to
for
me, sorry.
2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it went out to bid, and that, you know, made it seem like it is much more tangible.
Does anyone think there's any concern from neighborhoods as far as the road garage being close to a subdivision or anything like that?
I'd say,
Is it?
You're asking me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I would say that it would, you know, if this moves forward, I think it'd be smart to include the Canewood neighborhood, to say this is our intention, and this is how we intend to make it as minimal impact to you guys as possible with, again, the positioning of those equipment sheds so that it's not facing facing the neighborhood, and there's the existing tree line that's there on that property line that will hopefully screen them from really even knowing that this thing goes up
Are
there.
the sound barriers, are they out that far? The sound barriers
Yes,
are built,
yeah.
they're all
Yes.
beyond that?
All the way to the bridge.
But this is elevated, so they would have a line of sight.
Okay.
Any other questions? I think Bill, when he explains a little bit about the facility, will explain, John D., what your question is. Because that's built into the plan, as he can explain to you. Any other questions from Brad?
Just a comment, Judge, there's quite a
Question.
difference in the cost of the.
Well, I think that's quite obvious, yeah.
Yes.
Question or not sure if it's a question or comment. I do agree with Mr. Hoffman's point that ultimately our evaluation needs to be what best serves our needs at some point down in the future. And I'm sure that'll be a strong consideration, but there's also a real interest from the court about getting the project underway. And that's obviously why we've retained you all to look at both preliminary building design and a site evaluation. I'm concerned about our prior experiences with the Corps of Engineers. And if there's an interest in moving the project forward fairly expeditiously, are those Army Corps of Engineer approvals going to create time hurdles that just make the project very difficult to get started?
Well, I think that what you all are doing, you know, what's intelligent about what you guys are doing is that, you know, evaluating the two sites, we know pretty well the hurdles that each site would have. And so if it was determined that the Cincinnati Pike site was what, you know, was ultimately decided upon, you know, we've still got, you know, a few months of construction, design, development that has to go in place before these things are ready to go to a contractor. And so knowing what we know, we could hit the ground running with the Corps to get them involved from day one to say, this is what we're, you know, this is what we see, this is what we anticipate having to do, and try to get that wheel going as quick as possible so that it doesn't hold up the timeline from getting this construction documents finished to a contractor. So that as soon as the contractor gets it, he knows what he's pricing to bridge the dry run.
And actually, a process that involves a handful of months
Yes, sir.
doesn't sound too bad, but we've had an experience that's lasted a handful of decades with the Corps of Engineers,
Yes.
and I don't think we want to get into that situation.
Yes, it's an X factor that it's really hard for anybody to say how long it would take, because as soon as, you know, they start digging, it's with any development anywhere in the world. I mean, as soon as, you know, those agencies start digging, who knows what can be uncovered. And we deal with that all the time with everything, not just the Corps.
Brad, it seems to me if we go to the Cincinnati Road and go to the Corps, we would have to design the structure that was going over the
Yes, sir.
creek before we started.
Yes, sir.
Or they couldn't make a determination, I would think. You can't just say we're going to build a bridge and what is it?
Right, and so how we came up with, again, a cost for that was seeing, again, how wide that floodway is for dry run, again, because you have the creek and then it's virtually flat for a significant amount of space before it starts to elevate. So we did our best guess on, you know, what would be the most cost-effective way of creating a box culvert that has the most minimal impact to the floodway, so that's changed as little as possible. And so, again, that we coordinated with a firm called Contact that builds the box culverts. They're pretty well known throughout the area, and they gave us, you know, their opinion on what would work and a cost opinion on what that would cost to install.
Do you know, Brad, what size box culvert they're talking about? I'm talking about in length,
100 feet.
100 feet.
Yes, sir.
Most of the box culverts we're building now are at the 120,000 are about 12, 14 feet.
Okay, yes. Yeah, and if it was a stream and it went straight up, it'd be a totally different issue.
Yeah.
It's just so wide.
Where we're replacing them on a road, they're just as wide, maybe 20 feet.
Yes, sir.
The one thing I don't want to do is cost is very important, but then you see so many times government entities go lowest cost, and then 5 or 7 or 10 or 15 years down the road, you're spending 4 times what you initially spent because you should have spent a little more money in the beginning, and you were trying to be conservative and you blew it out of the water. And I don't want to be in a situation where we look at this and we go, okay, we're going to do this because the main factor is money and we want to spend $1 million less, and then 10, 15 years down the road, a potential another court is spending $15 million to develop a new facility somewhere else because this one doesn't work any longer, or it's not in the right area, or we've outgrown it. So money is very important, but longevity is more important than money, because if we don't get longevity, then we're going to spend more money down the road.
You know, and Brad, I think most everyone has been out there and seen Dry Run Creek at this point is a very small stream.
Is Dry Run?
It's Dry Run. It's dry.
It's dry.
The problem is that the land lays flat to either side, and that's what you're saying.
Yes, sir.
Causes is the greatest cost, because those of us who've been out there and grew up in that area know that it's a very small stream, and to that matter, what we have crossing it now was probably not meet spec from somebody up the food chain. But it's a very small stream. The cost seems to be with the land that lays on either side of it. It's a flat area that years ago was cropped. You know, it was in crops because it was bottoms.
Does the Division Water fall into the picture in this?
Yes, sir.
Not just the Army Corps,
Yes,
the
it's
Division of Water.
too, yes, sir.
So they're going to look at the fact of it being a major creek compared to a stream.
So we'll have to model, you know, what it's doing now, and then model the post-development after culvert was in to show them that we're not impacting, you know, upstream or downstream. And again, it's just if we knew that bypass was happening tomorrow and they're going to build probably a beautiful bridge over that stream and we could connect right to it, again, it changes a lot in my opinion. Because if we go to the time, and again, the time to mess with the Corps and the Kentucky Division of Water, install the culvert, and then all of a sudden the governor says we're going to build the rest of the bypass, and they're going to do the same thing. Again, it just, as we looked at it, just felt like that could be potentially, you know, again, a cost that wouldn't need to happen if it's going to come from state or federal money.
I got a question, probably more for JR. The coal patch mix site that's out there, how important would it be to have that adjacent to your facility? I mean, I know you're separated now. We have the potential to be joined with this project. Is that how big of a deal is that?
It's not a big deal.
Speak just a little bit, Brad, about the septic system on both sides. We've kind of glossed over that.
Well, yes, I think both sites, again, as you look at what soil is out there from the USGS, neither one is completely ideal for septic, but it's soil that is dealt with. You know, it's the kind of soil that's dealt with every day in the county, and we can make it work. It's obviously going to be a pretty significant size, and we've got, I believe it was $40,000 or $50,000 in there for each site to install a septic system to handle the project. And then as Bill pointed out in his study, they've got the oil water separators for the building that would separate all that out before it went to septic system, and then all of that would leach out into the adjacent property within the boundary of our site.
Brad, I have one question about the Dry Run area.
Yes, sir.
Is any part of that would be considered a wetland?
I didn't see any evidence of that. I mean, obviously the stream is a
Because
wetland
if
area.
it is, we disturb that, that would have to be replaced.
Right. But just driving through there and walking up and down the stream, I didn't see any areas that appeared to be, that have the plant material that says this is, you know, a wetland ecosystem. That doesn't mean it's not there, but just in the 2 trips I made out there.
Any other questions or comments? We're probably gonna have to have you come back.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah, after.
Please look through it, and I'm sure you'll
Yeah.
find more questions and issues and discussion items to talk about. And, I've been into it for, almost 2 months now, so I'd be happy to come back and talk about the ideas you guys have and things you see that need to be considered before a decision is made.
And Bill, if you don't mind to touch on the facility, particularly the questions that were asked about the future.
Thank you.
Well, again, thank you. Again, I'm Bill Pickering with CMW. The booklet you have, just a quick overview. There's a table of contents after the first page, the introduction page, and the book is basically divided. The first portion of the book covers the programming analysis section, and then the second half is the concept design of the building, and then the appendix has just the pages of the equipment inventory. So just a quick overview of what you're looking at. The first part had to do with information gathering with the road department. I had a number of meetings with the road department staff, with JR and his foreman, and went through the facility and took a look at their operations and the equipment. We did an equipment inventory, reviewed the vehicles, the different kind of vehicles that they have, and then also discussed staff and staff utilization. And I focused on the mechanics, because this building will be used by all the staff, but a lot of the staff throughout the year, they're out in the county doing their different tasks, whether it's mowing, plowing, whatever, road repair, edge repair. But the building is primarily focused on the mechanic work, the repair work that is conducted on all the vehicles. And so what we looked at was the staff currently has 3 mechanics, and so what we looked at is what the utilization was for a typical year, and what that evaluates is the time that they spend on preventive maintenance on all the vehicles. So each vehicle, a particular vehicle may have a maintenance 2 times a year and 4 hours spent for that particular visit. So we've got all the vehicles, we've got preventive maintenance, and then we also looked at the number of hours spent by the mechanics on the breakdown maintenance. So it's the times the vehicles break down unexpectedly through the year. Calculate the total hours, and then when you consider any staff member, mechanic, his utilization rate for a year, he's not going to be working at 100%. He's going to have a slightly less, because we've got vacation time, sick time, time that's utilized on other issues. So I used a factor of 75%, which is sort of an industry standard 75% utilization factor for the total hours. You take those hours, you add them up, and you compare them with the potential total. And the first thing that was doing was to evaluate that the facility has a need right now of about 2.3 mechanics, and so you've got 3 mechanics, and so you do have the right number of mechanics. And that number also did not account for the time that they do spend on small engine equipment repairs, such as weed eaters and hand mowers and things like that. So the number goes up slightly. But also what in that is that you still have excess capacity man-hour-wise on the number of mechanics that you have right now to take you into the future. And I used a 2% growth rate per year, and before the issue of a mechanic comes into play, you've got 10 years of growth ahead of you before the potential using those growth rates for the discussion of adding a mechanic. Now, another aspect of evaluating the number of mechanics is because we want to determine what's the right appropriate number now and for some growth in the future before you have to consider a facility change of any kind, expansion, of the number of vehicle stalls that are needed and vehicle bays. Vehicle stalls are the individual spot that the vehicle will sit, and the vehicle bay can be larger. And so on this report, when we talk about a vehicle stall, it's the space that the vehicle takes. A vehicle bay is on this proposed facility. We have got 2 vehicle stalls together end to end, making 1 vehicle bay, and they're going to be drive-through bays. Purpose of having, now going back to the evaluation of number of mechanics, you've got 3 mechanics now, and the best utilization of a mechanic is to be a mechanic can serve 2 stalls at one time. He's going to be working on one vehicle is being prepped. If he's got to wait for a particular piece of equipment, it's on order, a part to replace, that vehicle can stay there and he can work on the other vehicle. So that you've got more efficiency from your mechanic in terms of utilization. And so 3 mechanics currently, that relates to having 2 stalls per mechanic. That's 6 stalls. And the way we've organized this building, and these are through discussions with the road department, is to have them organized, aligned, so that we have 3 drive-through vehicle bays. All the bays are drive-through so that, again, depending on what vehicle is being serviced, we do have the potential that the vehicles can back out if another vehicle is taking longer and in the sequence of maintenance. And the bays are so long that we can handle in any bay the largest vehicle and a shorter vehicle in that one bay. Largest vehicle being the dump truck with plows or fire truck. We're talking a vehicle in the range of 43 feet. So we evaluated that to establish the understanding and justification for the number of vehicle stalls and vehicle bays. Looking at the future, there's a question regarding the future. The concept design has been organized so that with the organization of the bays, at the end of the building there's also a vehicle wash bay that's also drive-through. So that in the future, one scenario option would be for that vehicle wash bay to become an enclosed bay as part of the maintenance shop, and the vehicle wash area be relocated on site. Could be extended on to the end of the building. That'll be depending on how we organize the site layout. But the building in itself, the design has the capacity for growth in the vehicle side and the maintenance shop side, and at the other end of the building is the staff administration area. And so there's that's organized with, again, both there's a spine corridor that connects all the way through the building from one end to the other, and that's allow for linear growth at each end of the building for more staff support space at one end and more vehicle shop space at the other end in the future as needed. This facility, the concept of this facility is to be a facility that can be in place for 50 years before any significant issue has to come into play. When you talk about mechanics and growth in the future and the vehicles being serviced, when you get to the point in the future where the growth demand now says you need now 4 mechanics, you can still operate with the 6 stalls because, as I said, the ideal is having 2 stalls per mechanic, but that doesn't mean that you can't drop down to having 1 stall for a mechanic. And in an operation of having 6 stalls and 4 mechanics, you can still operate, but you lose some efficiency because you've got the a mechanic now not having the availability of having 2 stalls to work at. That's one option. Another scenario is going to be in the future to go to 2 shifts of work. There are road departments, maintenance facilities that do have more than 1 shift. Currently, you're working with 1 shift only, and so that's 1 daytime shift. And so that's another way of gaining capacity before you'd have to expand the building. Now, this building is also organized and understood with that utilization that the typical operation is 1 shift through the year, except in adverse weather conditions, which happen most often in the winter. And that's when one mechanic may be working around the clock, especially in the wintertime, to deal with not so much, it would be mainly breakdown maintenance would happen with primarily the trucks and plows that are out 24/7 during adverse weather events, especially in the winter. But there may be a mechanic working that kind of time frame, having 3 shifts as well. But again, the programming and the analysis was wanting to first establish the basis of how big this facility really needs to be for now to meet current capacity and have the ability for growth in its current state without having to deal with any kind of expansion in just a few years. So again, this building, the concept is based on giving you a facility that's going to last for 50 years and without any kind of concern at this point to go 10 years out in the future before, again, depending on what the growth is, but again, I've got planned growth already into it before there's a consideration to add a mechanic. Now there are, in the concept design, there are, in this facility, there are 3 primary buildings. There's the maintenance building, and you'll see some plans about that. And all the plans are fold out to make them a little bit larger so you can actually see them. There are a number of sheets on that, and that was the primary building we focused on because, and the other 2 buildings are the equipment shed and the salt barn. We focused just primarily now on the maintenance building because that's really the guts of the facility. The salt barn, the road department has requested a facility that its primary purpose is storage of the salt and to handle a 5,000 ton capacity of salt. And so the building size that we're showing there is based on a 5,000 ton capacity of salt storage. That particular design is based on a package that can be purchased that comes sort of in that, all the package to be built in that configuration that you'll see. It could be something else, but it's primarily a wood structure because that's going to be the most resistant material against the rot of the potential of the de-icing salts. Now the equipment shed is shown here, and here is one building, but depending on the site, final site layout, site selection and layout, that building could be 2 or 3 or 4 buildings, smaller in size. What I've been working with the road department, we were breaking down, and to keep this report simple, decided not to get into all the different scenario options because it could become confusing unnecessarily. But based on the use of the vehicles, so we may have, if we break it down into some smaller sheds, there may be one shed that's going to be where the equipment that's used mainly in the seasonal, summer, so you get a lot of the mowing vehicles and so forth in one shed and the winter stuff in another. We looked at potentially breaking it out in that kind of configuration. And that could change what the equipment shed really is, but this report was just going to give you a sense of the kind of magnitude of what we're looking at for that storage. Now the building, again, is what we focused on, and it's organized, and here's the plan. It's organized, a large area, again, is the maintenance shop, and the small area at the end is the administrative and staff support, and there's a access aisle through the shop. It's dedicated access aisle for safety reasons as well, and that access aisle continue into a quarter through the admin support areas. Again, the organization of this is based on discussions with the road department in terms of operations and improving efficiencies for them and how they operate, not just in the shop, but move back and forth from the shop to the locker and restroom areas as well. Simple things like having hand wash at the doorway before they go from the shop into the staff area so that they're not grabbing the doorway with all the greasy hands. Simple things like that that you got to take into consideration. So that's what this report goes into. And with that said, are there any questions?
I have one for JR just for a moment. Do we have any figures on what it's going to cost to dismantle what's on the county park now?
No, sir. That hasn't been discussed on.
Should we not be looking at all this at the same time, or close to it?
We don't even know what we're going to do with the building at this point in time, John.
One point I wanted, you brought up, you sort of brought up and made me think of that another part of the existing facility versus the new replacement facility. One thing we've got issues with vehicle lift. In the existing building there's an in-ground vehicle lift, and more and more facilities are moving away from in-ground vehicle lifts for the obvious environmental hazard issues of having that kind of assembly underground, especially if there's a leak. And so we're still looking at that for this facility, but also looking at options for having the lift, a large vehicle lift. The type would be like a 2-post or 4-post assembly that would be all above a slab. Just to give you a magnitude of scale, the lifts are about, for a quick rule of thumb, it's about $2,000 a pound for its lifting capacity. So if you're talking about a 30,000 pound vehicle, you're looking at $60,000, $80,000 for that particular lift. A vehicle exhaust, each vehicle stall will have a vehicle exhaust connection to it. It'll be required. Again, a rule of thumb, it's going to be about, with this facility, 6 stalls, it's about $10,000 per stall for the vehicle exhaust. So it's about $60,000 for the vehicle exhaust system. Those specialty systems are what's going to be drives the cost a little bit. It's again for cost control. This building, the maintenance building, is proposed as a metal pre-engineered metal building structure. We're going to have a masonry base around the entire building, extending up 7 feet, outside, inside. Again, that's to prevent decay primarily due to de-icing salts, which affect the sheet metal work of metal buildings a whole lot more if you've seen that happen. So, and also for just a typical abuse that'll happen in a facility like this. And so there again, a masonry base, pre-engineered building structure, and then the insulated metal panel walls and roof, and then it'll be glazing. We wanted if you've been to the maintenance facility now, it's really dark. And it really needs to be illuminated well, and whenever we can use natural sunlight we will, but we also need to get good illumination and good reflectance off the floor so that it make a much better working environment.
Any questions?
Comment. And I haven't had time to go through this very much, but will there be a separate line item for furniture, fixtures, and equipment, which is what I'm sounding like there may be?
What I have in here right now, there's the cost opinion information is near the back right before the appendix. There's a cost opinion on each building, and then a summary page puts them all together. I haven't priced, when you said furnishings, there's not furnishings, loose stuff. Generally speaking, everything that's in here is what would be in the building, and if you turn the building upside down and shook it, it didn't fall out, it's in the construction cost.
Right.
So if it's anchored to the building in some way, it's part in here. So when you say furnishings, if we're talking about new equipment boxes or furniture for the offices, that's not included here. Now we could recommend a what we call FFE line
right.
item to cover those kind of things.
That's what I've typically seen, and a lot of times when you're talking pricing, if that's not in there, it's not really a true price because you're going to have to pay for that. I mean, you're going to have it.
Well, again, we can add that. I was on the presumption and not knowing where the county was with that. If you'd be buying all new things and having them just move furniture that you have in storage somewhere and you have them use that. That's a decision. That's where we have to have this discussion.
Right. I think it may be a combination of things because JR's got some stuff that probably he'll want to hang on to, and then he got some other stuff that's probably wore out. But I'm just saying that we probably need to address that now.
Okay.
And that's just my opinion. I don't want to try to speak for the court, but if we're going to do it, let's do it right. And back to what David was saying, there is a difference between price and cost. Mm-hmm. And if you get everything included and you get the right price, that could end. But if you don't do that, cost will go on forever.
Well, what we would want to do with that is keep that separate from the construction cost. That's a project cost because that would not be part of the construction. That's something the county would do independently of the construction, procuring furnishings. Mm-hmm. But we can add that as a line to give you that kind of based on the things that we've been talking with them. What we do for replacement fixtures, furnishings. You can do that.
Well, let us digest this and then probably have a committee to go through it and.
As Brad had said, we'll be just whenever you can come up with a date, time, we'd be happy to come back and meet. Because actually, the more that we can talk and work and get through to what really needs to be, that's critical for us as well. So we really want that to happen.
But the long term, the building and all this are the same regardless of either site.
Yes, the premise of this is that regardless of what site is selected, the three buildings, the three designs concepts we have here are going to work on both sites.
Okay. Any further questions or comments?
Just
Tom?
one question for Mr. Pickering. Mr. Hoffman brought up another interesting point. When we think about eventually remediating our current site, we know that the road department uses all kinds of fluids and materials, some of which are not that friendly. So I would assume, I'm sure that in your new building, you've designed adequate containment and steps to make sure that we don't in any unreasonable way foul a second site with any of the chemicals and materials we use.
First of all, the interior drainage in the building and at the vehicle wash are going to have oil water separators to deal with those particulate issues that get spilled in those from vehicles. Second, the fluid distribution system will be in a containment, and the waste fluids also be in containment, and they'll have provisions for spills. So those are standard things that we do have to do now. Now, on the existing site, they do have some containment on their waste oil now. But what was happening, that facility's been there how long, and what was happening many years ago, there could be some contamination residual on that site from the existing long-term use of the site that would have to be addressed, I'm sure. Changing the subject, but going to the point of my professional opinion regarding the Corps of Engineers and Division of Water on the issue of having them involved in either of the projects, based on my long-term experience of dealing with projects that they get involved, I will be surprised if they can address everything and respond and have everything formalized and finalized in 4 months. Not saying we can't have it ready for them, but for them to act that quickly. I personally have never seen them act that quickly. But again, that's just my professional opinion on my long-term history of working with projects that dealt with them on that.
Yes, sir. And I do hope that as the court approaches this project, as a part of the total project cost, we'll consider fully remediating. What if we don't know how we're going to use that building yet, but I hope that we remediate it.
Yeah, well, it's got to be. But the thing we've got to realize that this court is not going to be the ones that got to pay the bills, because 5 members are not running, and I may not be here. So somebody else is going to be making those decisions. And regardless, JR is going to be out there at that building for at least another 7 or 8 months, because the building, you don't just vote for it and then there it's, it's going to take, and at the best case scenario, it would start maybe in November, and that's pushing it. And then you got winter, and the magnitude of this proposed project is months, yes, not weeks. So regardless of what our intent is, there possibly be 2 people back on this court.
Well, we can certainly give you again a line item just for information, and based on what first demolition would cost for that site, and based on just a small, sort of a guesstimate of there may be some remediation, what that would cost, and so give you kind of an idea of excluding that there's some found significant remediation problem of, but to give you an idea of the kind of cost you'd be looking at for demolition and removal of that site, returning it to just an empty site. Yes. We could add that also, because that's a separate thing, and it shouldn't have a bearing on your site selection or moving forward. But again, just to go back to the question of having more knowledge about the overall cost.
Yes, sir.
And one thing that this court and the other court has to keep in mind, we do not have an unlimited budget. So, pie in the sky is good, but we've got to pay for it, and we've got to maintain a financial stability for the future.
And the other aspect of that is that doesn't have to be removed and remediated immediately.
No. Another court may decide a different direction. We have no idea. We have no idea who they're going to be, except David and Alvin.
Don't sound so depressed about it.
What?
Don't sound so depressed about it.
I am depressed. I wish, it's a whole different team, so kind of like Calipari, a new team so. Well, any further discussion? What I'll do, I'll get the group together and we'll kick these things around and see where we are. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Brad, thank you. Christy, thank you all for having so much patience. You've learned more information than you ever needed.
Judge, I think I'm going to recuse myself from this item on the agenda because of potential going with parks.
I didn't know it had anything to do with parks, but that's fine.
Well, I think
That's fine,
I
that's
think there's a
fine.
connection.
Okay, go ahead.
Good morning, magistrates and judge and county attorney and guests. I'm Christy Robinson, and on June 13th, Jason Hale and Ray Clear came before you and presented the final study for the Legacy Trail extension, and I wasn't able to come because I had some surgery, so I apologize I wasn't able to be here. And since that time, they have produced the hard copy, and I learned that there had been some questions on the court about the proposal and our request for $25,000. So if you would like to state your concerns and maybe we can answer those, we'll do our best.
My primary concern is I'm not against the trail, and I'm unsure about the county funding. I'm not even there yet, but using the tunnel in front of the granary as a crossing for those bikes is just off the table to me. I will not vote to spend one dime of county money to create that kind of hazard. I mean, it's just a nightmare waiting to happen. And as long as that's on the table, I will not support any participation in the project.
Well,
I mean, it's just a safety issue. I mean, that's all it is.
That is, it's a
safety issue.
Yeah, I understand
It is.
that. I mean, that's totally understandable. Jason can speak a little more to that. I would like for you all to keep in mind, Alvin, particularly you, is that the trail ends at the horse park on the Ironworks side park from Lexington. Eventually, it's going to come through the horse park, and wherever we start ours, even if we started at the soccer fields or thereabouts, people are going to come through that tunnel and cross the road. There's no doubt about that.
We don't have to encourage them to do it.
No.
I'm not going to support spending any county money to encourage that disaster to happen.
So at some point in time, I'm sure there will be a way to come through and come across the road. We don't know what that will be. This is all proposal, of course. There are 4 sections. We divided into 4 sections, and we'll eventually get to each section, and where we start is questionable at this point in time too. But Jason may want to address the safety issues and what can be done to prevent there being any accidents or anything like that.
I'll be happy to speak on that and touch a little bit more on it, but just to try to recap what Christy had said, this is a study that looked at the best and most viable option to come through here, and there was another study that was even performed prior to ours, which was the student study performed by the Landscape Architecture Department of under the direction of Dr. Brian Lee, and this was a 600-page report, and our preferred route was the same crossing that goes beneath this tunnel at the Barton property, that also connects to the horse park. But in our assessment, we wanted to look at multiple other ones. We didn't want to just duplicate this, even though that was the preferred route that we ended up selecting. But there wasn't as much of an analysis and inventory of other connections to get, to bridge the gap from point A to point B. But, we looked at extending on through Ironworks. We looked at even bridging at the county line, if you recall. But, this example has already been built at the Main Chance Farm on the existing Legacy Trail. And, what we're wanting to do is to advance this study so that this can be improved upon and be a safe crossing. But just for example, the Main Chance crossing is actually, it's even shorter. It's also, they have, there's signage. They have painted it a light color so that there is greater visibility. But, obviously, yes, there are some concerns about safety here, but we're only addressing one property owner, and that's the Bartons, but there's also, you know, the horse park. This is also the state. This is within state right of way. I have an exhibit that I can show you as well if you're interested in seeing, as well as this exhibit. But you know, the state highway department, the transportation capital, would not approve this if it wasn't, in their opinion, a safe design. But right now, this is just the study. What we would be looking for, you know, at the next step was actually to design this with adequate visibility, signage, and even lighting, traffic calming devices that would make for the safest option. But you also consider the use at which time both the farm operation works and when the trail users, the larger volume of trail users would be out here, would be either after working hours or on the weekends, likely when this wouldn't be as.
I don't think that'll be
That's my
applicable
point.
on this point.
The people that
That's-
are doing these
that's
studies do not understand what goes on there, and that's exactly the point. During harvest season, there is no weekend, there is no Friday night, there's no Saturday, no Sunday during harvest season. And that's when the concern is there.
What
So
about
that's my
harvest?
point. I
Can
mean,
you
the people that are
elaborate
doing these
on-
studies are not seeing the true concern that's gonna happen there.
Could you elaborate when harvest season is? Is it in the fall?
Started in July with wheat.
The big rush is
And the big rush is
September,
in the
November,
fall,
October,
September through
December.
December.
But
And
what
it
about-
all, you know, it depends on weather and everything else. But Alvin's point's exactly spot on, is that to the normal consumer, there are weekends.
Mhm.
This is not a normal, this is an agricultural practice that is a business enterprise behind there. The working hours may be till midnight. They may start at 4 in the morning. So
I
the
don't think you have many
consideration
trail
is
riders at
not
that
being
time.
given that this is not just a farm for its own operational sake. It is also the buying and selling of grain
Mhm.
from farmers to other farmers and to other entities. So it's much more complicated than simply being a small farm. It's not a small farm, but it's a large enterprise that has a lot of traffic, and it's large, heavy traffic that cannot stop quickly.
Yeah, and I'm certain that they contribute a lot to the community, and we wouldn't want to step on their toes or endanger any potential trail rider on this either. But, you know, when we have the conversations with the horse park, the trail hasn't even come up through here yet, but they have worked, you know, in reciprocally with the Barton Farm owners, and they wouldn't want to step on any toes. And, you know, what we're looking for is to just see how this crossing could be designed in the most safe crossing. But, you know, I'd hate to think that I understand these operations and how vital they are to, you know, this facility, the park, I'm sorry, but the farm and how it operates. It goes on throughout the year, and obviously it's more busy during the harvest season, but would that prohibit then trail riders in the off season, in the spring, or even in the winter months when there might be people, you know, interested in riding this and visiting and bridging, you know, Lexington to Georgetown and other tourist options that, you know, might also be able to contribute to the community as well?
There's traffic throughout the year. It's not
Correct.
nearly as heavy, but those bins are probably still, some of them are still full, and they're trucking out there probably every day or so.
Mhm.
So there's still trucks through there year round, but
Yes.
the big crush is in the summer through fall, and it just.
One of the things that our mission is to have a trail bike hybrid because of the problem with obesity, the problem with people not getting enough exercise, and it provides a recreational activity for all levels of society, from those who have the least to those that have the most, all ages of society. So that's what the Lexington Legacy Trail did. That's what we would like to see a trail do in Scott County. If you saw the paper this morning, the Herald Leader, there was an article, and there's always an article on the back of the sports page, and it's called Health. And it says, study faults under exercising for obesity. And I know you all are aware of that. But what they did, they studied for 22 years why people are becoming more and more and more obese. And it wasn't because they're eating more calories. They're getting less exercise. And so that's our mission. That's what we want to accomplish. And I understand your concerns. I'm concerned with that too. I wouldn't want to ride my bike. You know, I'd be very fearful because I know what Lyle Road is like.
Mhm.
Very, very
Again, I'm not opposed,
Yeah.
but if you meet that 80,000-pound grain truck, it don't matter how fat you are.
One of the things that I would like to propose, because we've asked for the $25,000 from the court, which is a match for a $100,000 grant from the Transportation Alternatives Project. And because we have to have money from a public entity match funds in order to get the grant. And what that will do is provide for a study, to do a design study before we ever did the trail. So what I would like to ask you all, we would probably do sections 2 and 3 first. The one that comes under the trail, under the tunnel is section 1. Then there's section 2, section 3, and section 4, ending in a tunnel. So if you would be willing to do that, we could provide that money for section 2 or section 3, because those are going to be the easiest one for us to design and build anyway, because there are the least landowners. It's almost all public property.
Section 2, where will it start on the
It would
south
start
end?
about the soccer fields.
Yes, for the currently proposed Amerson Farms development by Dennis Anderson, up to the Hickman Creek.
Up to where?
The Hickman, the creek crossing.
Right, okay.
Christie, did you say the city had authorized
Yes.
funding for what section?
Well, it would be probably for section 3 then, because that's what we would do first, is the easiest, the lowest hanging fruit you get first.
Sure.
And to clarify, you have to first state, you have to submit a statement of interest in the fall before then. That's kind of the initial submittal for this grant application before then the other grant application. But we're actually just trying to get some of this funding in place so that we can prepare the application.
With that in mind, would the court vote to provide up to $25,000 for phase 2? I know it's a little sticky.
I can't vote for it because you're still going to be ending that trail where they're going to be thinking that that's the most logical choice at that time. And I cannot support anything that will put bikes and trucks in that tunnel. That's where I'm at.
Is with the study of section 2, is it confirmed, and I understand Ms. Lyons' point, are we just going to look at where else we can go besides this tunnel? I mean, if we're going to the tunnel, I agree with Alan. I don't see use in studying what I'm going to vote against. Any use of that tunnel, I'm going to vote against for bikes.
The preferred route, alternate number 4 that we prepared was to use the tunnel. Not to say that we didn't look at other options, but those were the ones that were either more cost prohibitive or they would circumvent some of the other connections that were considered, destination points like the community park, like other civic locations. So that is the preferred route.
You keep talking about the tunnel, and I'm sitting over here trying to process what would happen if a grain truck hit a biker or a walker. But also in that whole process, it just popped in my mind, what if the court voted and agreed through the tunnel, we sat here and talked about the inherent risk of what could happen. What inherent risk and liability are we assuming if we're saying we know the traffic flow, we know how bad it gets, and we know somebody could be killed, maimed, injured in the future, but then we go on ahead and vote yes on it? Because we've recognized the inherent risk now. And once you recognize the inherent risk, you don't want to be in the situation where you say, okay, we accept that.
You sound like someone who works for an insurance company. No, you're right. I think you've got a good point. I mean, we made it apparent. That's our concern.
It's a legitimate concern because a tandem load of rock or grain or whatever comes through is not going to have reaction time. People
right.
travel in groups. A lot of them like to go in maybe 10 or 15 to a group. You might not, if you're looking at risk level, it could be a major risk at one time. And I can't right off the bat tell you an alternative that would be least expensive or anything else, but in this case, it seems like in a cost factor, we should eliminate that possibility. I have to be in agreement on that part because I know what you're talking about, farm operations and how it goes and how many loads are going to come through. I mean, they do deal in the business. So consider it a business and not just a farm. Can you go on up? Is there a way to expand it to possibly Lemons Mill Road?
Not without going through the Barton's property. Or, the most feasible alternative might be to actually bridge something that crosses the interstate. But there we're talking about something that would be in the, it probably, you couldn't touch it for the design and construction for under $500,000. But I would like to touch on both the liability as well as the design concerns about this, because we're talking about a speeding grain truck, I realize, but realistically, are they going to be maneuvering in and out of here? So it would be at low speed. So I think the greater likelihood is going to be visibility, and as well as having this be, we're not talking about maybe a traffic controlled intersection, but you could have something that is temporarily designed that would allow motorists to know along Lyle Road when there might be someone that pushes a button, much like a pedestrian crossing, where a temporary flashing light could turn red to present a stop condition. But I'm just throwing that out because right now our objective was to look at various routes, which we did in the study, but the likely connection, this was the preferred connection because it can be designed for. But again, talking about the liability associated with it, it's whoever ends up stamping these, the professional that stamps the design drawings to get this thing constructed would likely be at greater liability for this, or even it's located on state right.
That doesn't prevent us from being sued, though.
No,
I mean that's we could end up in a multi-million-dollar attorney fee lawsuit that there ends up being no judgment in the future, other than we're exonerated and millions have been spent. And I have to. I don't farm. I never did farm. It's not my family background, and I have to turn to their expertise and their knowledge of what goes on that property. And the more I think about it too is we've talked about protecting the agriculture land, and I would not want to do something that would drive a property owner who farms currently, when we just approved a rezoning to build a large implement sales company to do repairs and sales, and then we do something that impacts a large farm owner. Those two just brush up against each other, and it's not good. I mean, we made a decision over here, but then we make another decision that affects the farming community. And I'm just, as far as the tunnel, the more I think about it, the more we talk about it, I 100% agree with what Alvin and Stuart have said.
What is the height and width of the tunnel? Do you have those dimensions?
I believe that it's 14 by 14. 14 feet high, 14 feet
You
wide.
got no running room.
No running.
Who owns the tunnel?
It's located on state right of way. And I can show you this as-built drawing from 1962.
Christie, have you all talked with the traffic engineers for the state about the situation and the ideas of what you want to take place here?
Well, when they did the study, they talked to District 7.
That looks like 1960.
Now, again, this is just, sort of a concept of where the trail will go. The next step is what we're trying to ask for is money for a design, how it should be designed, and what kinds of traffic control would be put in, if it came through the tunnel. But as I said, we would first design section 2, which is the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, I understand what they're saying as well, though, is if you start designing other sections that tie in and make your only option the tunnel, then we've completely hamstrung the whole idea that we're not interested in going through that tunnel.
So the tunnel is, again, I'm just looking for direct answers. The tunnel is owned by who? state.
It's located within the state right away. So yes, we all have access to go out there presently. I mean, the problem is it leads to the horse park and the park.
And the farm boundary simply adjoin this cut through?
It's inside, yeah, it's inside. I mean, it borders the interstate, this tunnel is under the interstate, so it's actually part of the
It was
interstate.
when the interstate was built, it's landlocked, this particular farm, and they had to give access to the farm. So they had to build the tunnel at that
Correct.
time.
Okay, but so it's a state access point.
Because it's on state property.
Mhm.
Right.
So it could be construed to be, well, it is public
It
property.
is public.
It's public.
It is
Right.
public.
So I just want to make sure, we've gotten way away from that point. I just
No,
want to make
it
sure that we do.
is owned by a governmental agency, and it is public. The only two people that have reason to use it currently are the horse park and Barton's, because theirs are the only two properties. Once you go back through the tunnel time, whether it's 30 feet or 50 feet there, that's sort of state property, I would say. And then if you go any further either direction, you have to go on the private property or the horse park.
One of the things way before the study was even put into motion, well, not way before, but right at the beginning, we looked at possibly going on the edge of the Barton Brothers property and just bypassing the tunnel and going up to Lennon's Mill.
That is correct.
But they didn't want to have it.
Is there a way they can do lighting on Lowell Road that would stop a truck from going in the tunnel while the pass through?
I'm no engineer, and I wouldn't pretend to be. However, what some common design solutions may be is that you would have flashing lights placed several hundred feet beyond this point, this intersection. I mean, it's treated much like a street, an intersection. You know, you design for either a bike facility or a roadway facility, but for the visibility and the design speed associated with Lyle Road, you would place these flashing lights or warning caution lights prior to this intersection to alert people of where it would be. You would also have striping and some other forms of signage too.
Well, we're used every day to stoplights and directives. You've got a crosswalk here that we've got paintings on the road, and you got signs, and has the state agreed that they would do that with the road?
At this point, no advanced conversations have taken place either with federal highways or with the state. But I can safely say that a design solution could be developed that would, I believe, appease both the Barton Farm as well as the horse park.
It would have to be done on both sides. It would have to be done on the Barton side and on the other side.
Without question. And that's where it would include, I think to have a design solution that would be constructed, you would have to include all parties in those conversations to make certain. But that would be the next step, you know, not at this
That lessens
present
my
time.
concern more. If the traffic is totally controlled, truck drivers know what the score is, and the public knows what the score is. And I'd hope that would ease, agriculture concerns also. With enough warning for a truck driver and enough warning for pedestrians, I'd be a little bit more open to concern it if that was under those guidelines.
Christie, I'm kind of in the circumstances that Mr. Livingston's in. I've been around agriculture all my life, but I've never earned my living from it. I've never been actively engaged in it. And during my 16 years on the court, I've deferred to Chuck or Alvin or Stewart and or formerly Mr. Rankin and others that were active farmers and wanted to rely on their expertise. So I take what my peers say very seriously. Having said that, it's unfortunate that a public infrastructure project of this magnitude and of this potential importance to Scott County and tying together a regional trail system would be held or completely stopped by the wants of one individual or one individual property owner that has shown a reluctance to negotiate either a path along their farm or shared access of this roadway. Any time we make progress on public projects, there's some degree of cooperation. There's some degree of give and take, and what I'm hearing is just an absolute roadblock that this property owner doesn't want this site to be considered under any circumstances.
Tom, I never said to one property owner. They never said a word to me. I'm not even talking to them about it. This is what I know about the situation, and it would not be safe. Trucks are going to turn in. They're going to look at maybe 40 feet
That's
from the
what
time
I'm
you make
looking
the
at.
turn. You turn in on a sunny day, you cannot see in a tunnel. That's my problem. It's safety
Well,
issue.
and I was referring more to other options that,
Yeah, well, no, that's
Christie
not-
mentioned
yeah.
along the
anything
fence
about
road
that. I
that
don't
may
know
be
anything about
fenced
that.
off and kept completely separate from the rest of the agricultural activities. We do that with subdivisions. You know, urban encroaches on rural every day, and in every consideration we make, there are ways to make that work. We have made it work. It just seems a shame that a public project could completely stop over a lack of communication. Christie, it sounds to me like this tunnel is going to cause enough concern about the project to throw you off track. Is there not another viable alternative? I also agree with David's point that if we go ahead and plan for subsequent phases, knowing that ultimately we have to come back to this same question, then all we're doing is raising the stakes on the question unfairly. If we make so much progress toward one solution when we know that solution may not be feasible, we're simply raising the pressure on that solution. It seems like it might be better to rather than put off an inevitable decision about this tunnel, is there a way to rule it out now and move on in a more productive way? That's my question for you. But I would hope that those options would also include the one that you described of a walking right of way along a fence line that is completely separated from the rest of the agriculture operation. I can be very sympathetic toward these farmers' use of the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
But I would hope they would at least be receptive to other options if you've shown a respect of their concerns about the tunnel.
I greatly appreciate your insight as well as your opinions, and we did have conversations with, it was Ryan Quarles much earlier on, because he has a relationship with the Bartons, and he was actually going to be our direct contact with them to discuss an option to extend along their farm, at which time he said they were not interested in it because of their use of pesticides and other, chemical, their distribution of these chemicals that might put other trail riders or, participants at risk and then potentially at liability.
Does the trail go through other agriculturally used areas?
Yes, that is the irony. It goes through a large port. One of the largest pieces of property of the existing Legacy Trail does go through the Main Chance Farm, which is an active agricultural operation.
So we're
Same type?
That I couldn't.
No, I mean, because you could be talking about two different types of farms, so is it same type though? No?
It's substantially different, David, in that Main Chance or the UK farm, experimental farm, I guess the first thing to think of, one is for profit and one is not.
Well, the state has sovereign immunity anyway.
Yes.
So,
And that's a concern when you're an individual, that you don't have
Right.
sovereign immunity. So if the state made a mistake or an employee made a mistake, they're not anywhere at risk. Whereas on private property, that property, it goes back to what you said when you were here last time. We brought up about the railroad, and there was nothing to be gained by the railroad
Yes, sir,
except
but
liability.
liability.
And that's the same situation we ran into with private property owners, is that you really, there needs to be a bigger carrot out there for this.
I'd like to take a minute to speak about the KRS statute that actually limits landowners, if they dedicate property or an easement for recreational purposes, it actually frees them of the liability. Now, I mean, I don't know that much about it, but I have heard Elaine Wilson with, she's with the state. She is active tourism, that's what it is, but she has actually, she knows quite a bit about it, and she had said this is actually an incentive to discuss. This is somewhat of a carrot to negotiate with individual property owners because it frees them of the liability. But, you know, we haven't had those conversations directly with the Bartons, especially not since making this our final recommendation for this report. But I would like to think they might be more receptive to talking about this, but I don't know.
I think where we are with the tunnel there, that we're not going anywhere. Now, I'm not speaking for, just listening to the conversation. We can ask for a motion to proceed with the 25,000 if there's someone wants to make that motion. If not, we're going to have to do something with that tunnel. And it's a great project. Everybody on the court is for the project, but the tunnel is the barrier that we're going to have to deal with. Any further questions?
Unless our funds could be used to help try and loosen this log jam that we're facing right now, either through careful evaluation of other ways to cross the interstate. And I don't have a suggestion for you, or serious negotiations with the farm operators. Urban abuts rural all over central Kentucky. We've managed to make that work. I would hope that the few can't completely stop a project that has immense public benefit.
Christie, I know there's a small tunnel just up farther south on Isle Road that's not big enough. I don't know if it's a possibility to expand that some way would be cheaper than the overpass or not, but has that been looked at all?
I looked at it, and I've seen it. Did you look at it?
I know there's a utility chase, more or less, that is only 6 feet tall and about 3 feet wide. You can barely get the handlebars of a bike
I knew it
through
was
there.
small,
But is there another tunnel that you're
No, that's the one I'm
referring
talking
to?
about. I didn't know if it was possible to expand that at a lesser cost than actually bridging the entire interstate. It's my question.
I don't know. It has not been looked at.
Has there been any discussion with the, well, I call it Walnut Hall Farm, the back entrance to that? Has there been any discussion with the owners of that, of coming through that area to hit Lemons Mill? What do they call it, farm?
Well, you mean
The back entrance of Walnut Hall Farm. Because it goes from the horse park.
north side of the horse park.
Yeah.
North side of the horse park. They're the two sisters who own that.
Because the horse park's right connected. They're going to be, if they're part of a scenario, it seems like, I don't know if it throws your way out of whack or not, but it seems like that would be worth looking into.
Way back 2.5 years ago, when we very first started this project, we were in discussions with John Nicholson, who was head of the horse park. Of course, he's retired now, and he was an advocate for bringing the trail around the back of the horse park from where it ends right now, the Legacy Trail in Lexington. And the board actually voted to do that, but this was the foundation board for the horse park.
Right.
They, after that meeting though, where they voted that they would allow us to do that, we had some small grants. It wouldn't have taken much money because it was just striping and a little bit of signage. There were some very vocal people on that foundation board that did not think that horses and bikes would mix. And so they went to the two sisters of the Walnut Hall Farm, and they too were very much opposed to it at that time. Of course, that's been 2.5 years ago. So.
It seems like it would be worth the effort to renegotiate to see, because it would be ideal economically speaking, it would be ideal, but the horse park, the property owners would be the main concern. And bicycles are cleaner than cars, and they got trucks and cars on their property all the time. It might be worth approaching that.
Well, I think we've beat this to death.
Yeah, thank you very much for allowing us to come.
Okay, I do have one question. What is your deadline on applying for the grant?
Right.
The statement of interest is due in October.
Okay, so there is some time to revisit.
There is.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
And we greatly appreciate your opinions and insight.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Very good.
The Hamilton Street lease renewal for the public defender is up for renewal, and Glenn, if you'll discuss that.
I just looked over it very briefly. It looks like this is the office or the Commonwealth Attorney and his staff, and looks like this had an ending date initially of April 30th of 2014, but I believe you've had a conversation with at least one of the owners,
Yeah.
maybe not, and they're wanting to renew, as I understand it.
Yeah.
Is the renewal from July 1 through June 30th, is that what has been
That, just for a
discussed?
year, yes.
Okay.
It's
And I believe that's at $475 per month.
Yeah, I think Commonwealth Attorney, it's just the opposite.
Motion.
It's a prosecuting attorney.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, second, all in favor? Okay, that is,
Thank you.
the jail, has some issues, Larry?
Try to be brief if I can. Just, first thing I want you to know, that we've got our new camera systems set up at the jail. It's the first time since the jail's been operating that anything that happens in our facility is on camera. If there's a fight breaks out, we know who did it, who did what, if they're sick and this type thing. It's really, really the best thing we've had since we've been there, and I want you to know it's a lot safer, so I'm appreciative for that, of getting our system. And then we've got, we've recently, we use Southern Health for our medical people. And what we've done, I think we've talked with George. I don't know whether we've been approved on that or for sure whether we have or not. But what we're doing, we only have a nurse for 40 hours, 40 hours a week. And then what's happening to us at night, everybody that comes in, the nurse is not there. If they're sick, we don't know whether they're sick or not, whether they're faking, whether they're doing this type thing. And what we're doing is raising the amount from Southern Health for 66 hours, which will give us enough coverage on the second shift plus the day shift. And what because we don't know, like I say, every one of them would like to go to the hospital and get drugs or get whatever they get, that type thing. But we just don't have without that second nurse, we don't have anybody to verify whether they are sick or not. So we're trying to save the county. Is that understandable?
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably.
And then the last one, we've got our portable radios in the process. We're getting ready, or we're discussing that, right? Or is that ready to be approved?
It's ready to move, yeah.
Ready to go?
Yeah.
Well, other than that, I'm happy. So that's all you need.
Well, you got a new hire in there too, way up, Larry.
You might as well tell you the name, I can't say it.
Okay, at 10.25 an hour. Let's vote on that one.
Which one?
The new hire, part-time.
Make a motion.
John T. seconded. All in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. The other two things that Larry spoke about, we're required on the radios. That's already past the deadline, which was January 1st. I might mention that it's also not in his budget, but we have some money for transfer, so we can transfer money into there to cover it. It just means Larry, Carla, you're gonna really have to tighten your budget as we move forward. And this is under the state bid contract. So we can purchase them, and this is the same radios, JR, that throughout the county. And the total cost of the radios, they're on your agenda, $22,414.22. There's also a $500 license fee that goes with that. So we need a motion to approve that purchase and to move forward with it. Got those two. Any questions? All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Then the other is the, do you have a question?
No.
Get with JR and find out the vendor so we can move forward.
On the radio?
Yeah, on the radio.
Yeah, we've already, yeah, you have the bid.
It's on the sheet.
You have a copy of the bid on that already. You should
It's
have.
not a bid, it's a
Well,
cost. Yeah, it does not have to be bid because it's under state bid contract. The other is the Southern Health contract, and Glenn, you've got some comments on that.
Well, I've looked over the agreement. I failed to bring my notes in the last meeting, but I do have them today. And I sent Larry a letter, and Carla has been kind enough to respond and explain some things. There were 5 items that I had a little bit of a question on, and when I compared the contract with Southern Health Partners from last year to the one that's been proposed. And for the most part, the additional hours that Larry just mentioned for the nursing staff, that answers 2 or 3 of the things. That the increase from the base compensation from your last contract, base compensation was $125,700. Base compensation in this new one would be $171,466.20. But I think that's due by and large by the nursing staff increase in hours. There is a provision where the population is capped at 86. That's what our population was set for when the building was built. When it exceeds that, then there's a per diem rate for inmate residents at 27 cents per inmate for those over 86. It was 25 cents last contract. So again, I'm sure that's just a logical increase. The only thing that I had, and Carla has addressed this, in addition to the items I've just discussed, was in paragraph 7.3, and the change they have proposed in 7.3, this is on future years' compensation. The amount of compensation, the annual base price plus per diem rate to SHP shall increase at the beginning of each contract year. SHP shall provide written notice to the county of the amount of compensation increase requested for renewal periods effective on or after July 1st, 2015, or shall otherwise negotiate mutually agreeable terms with the county prior to the beginning of each annual renewal period. Now, you've got the ability to turn them down, and you've got the ability to terminate. You've got a 60-day out in paragraph 6.2, so it's not as if you're locked in. I guess my biggest question would be, they're telling you they're going to increase it every year. Now, maybe they're being upfront, maybe that's what we need to know. But nonetheless, the other items have been addressed by Larry and Carla in terms of, I think, the nursing staff being the biggest part of the increase in the base compensation. Those are the items I had.
Does this eat further into their budget, or was this?
That's a question I asked Mike yesterday, and he said, and I don't know if that was determined in your budget for, it was predetermined?
Well, that's on, as far as the copies that we have, it's 186.
How much did you have last year? Do you remember? Yeah, because if it's going to be an increase, it ought to be that much more than it was last year.
Which is what he put in our budget when he submitted it to you.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. You did
Yes, sir.
anticipate that, okay. And I don't have it in front of me, so.
Linda, would we have the ability to bid this like in March of next year to put it out for bid?
I think so. This is a contract that's good from the 1st of July 2014 through June 30th, 2015.
Which,
What are we operating under right now?
Southern Health Partners.
No, I mean, what contract? Because we haven't voted on a contract.
Well, I think
I mean,
you're operating on them being there. And
kind of an agreement of continuation of prior
I
until
think
we
so.
vote on this? Okay.
It's an automatic renewal if you don't change it yourself with a 2% increase. And then there was one done with Humphrey, I don't know if they actually sent it, but it was done in October 2013.
I want to do something I usually don't do, ask a question if you don't mind, excuse me, please. In the overall picture, let's just talk about taxpayers and take away from fiscal court, city, and everything else. And we talk about police officers and how they have to babysit when they go to the hospitals if they take them up there. Or your people, if you have to transport and they got to sit there possibly for 2 or 3 hours. By us taking on this additional person in medical care, will we save a big part of that? Will we be putting them back out on the street quicker, and will your staff be able to perform their duties more reasonable?
Yes, yes,
I mean, that's the goal, is to have where you have a nurse in the house. They can look at these people instead of us just having to call the ambulance and take them to the hospital, which is what we're currently doing in evenings now.
And if they do that, how long is someone tied up with that inmate going through that?
You know, it could be 4 hours as a minimum. ER visit is kind of what I calculate if we have to call somebody in. You know, that's at least 4 hours to call someone to cover that.
And if your staff doesn't do it, there's a possibility before you will take them, a police officer or sheriff's department will have to go up and them do it, right?
Right. And they're gonna do that anyway. We haven't accepted them yet. That's their responsibility
Right.
until we take.
But the taxpayers are still paying for it.
Yes, sir.
Sure. David, I think it was David asked the question about the budget. Last year's budget for that routine medical was $150,000, and this year's $186,470. So it's been up
Yeah,
$36,000.
that was good. Thank you.
Clint,
We need a motion to approve this.
If the contract is based on design capacity of the jail, and that's the base rate, but don't we regularly exceed the design capacity?
We did.
So-
Oh, well, Larry and Carla can tell you much better than me, but I would think that we're over 86 a lot of days, aren't we?
86 is what we, as far as maybe getting.
But I think the 86 number comes by way of
The
the
bed count.
beds that were available when the building was
This
first
report we
opened.
have today has 88 in there right now. But when this report was read, so we're 2 over right now.
Yeah, I just wondered if we know what our census normally is, and we can probably, the base rate sounds like it's a guesstimate, but it will be slightly higher than that since we normally exceed.
Yeah, I think they banked it on the, or base it on, I should say, the 86 beds are what the facility was actually constructed to hold. But we're consistently over that, I think, yes.
We may have as many as 125, but hopefully they don't stay in there. You know, that's what keeps it, we can't control it.
Is there a motion to approve the contract?
So
Second, anybody? Bill, all in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. EMS.
You go. Okay.
Good morning. I have a couple individuals that I would like to recommend to the court for promotion. The first individual would be Corey Wood. He would be going from paramedic to supervisor, and that would be an 80-cent per hour increase, and that's what our current increase is for supervisors. The other individual would be Michael Ratliff, and he would be going from paramedic to assistant supervisor, and that would be a 10-cent on the hour increase. This is not adding any additional supervisors. These are just to fill openings in which we already had.
Motion to that effect. Bill, David, all in favor? It's unanimous.
Thank you. And then I had one other. We would like to hire Alexander Daughtery as a part-time paramedic. and his salary would be $15 per hour.
Chuck? Bill, all in favor?
Thank you.
Have the lift beds been ordered?
I'm sorry?
The new lift beds, or gurneys, have they been ordered?
It's in the process right now. Yes, we were actually working with
We've got a
couple of the ambulance, or I'm sorry, a couple of the stretcher manufacturers yesterday, and hopefully,
ribbon
of course, it'll
cutting
have to go out to bid, but hopefully it'll be
11 o'clock.
done by the end of the month.
Did you tell them we had a fiscal court meeting?
Yeah.
We've got both, but we need to move on. We have a retirement, Mary Malone, effective July 31st with the electrical inspection. Need a motion to accept that. Bill, Tom, all in favor? Okay, that is unanimous. Anyone have anything to bring forward to court? Anybody? Mr. Hughes?
No, sir.
Mr. Lance?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, sir.
Nothing else.
Yes, sir. We have ribbon cutting at Japanese Garden. Stand adjourned.